Alberto Del Rio. In 2014, Alberto Del Rio's career imploded almost as dramatically as it had risen. After years of being presented as the wealthy Mexican aristocrat who won the 2011 Royal Rumble, the Money in the Bank briefcase, and 4 world titles, his story took a violent turn backstage. On August 7, 2014, he was fired for unprofessional conduct after slapping a WWE social media employee who, according to several reports, made a racist joke about him during catering. Del Rio claimed the remark provoked him. WWE framed it as assault. Within days, he appeared at 8AA's Triple Mania Vitae 3rd in Mexico, reclaiming his old name, Alberto El Patron. He returned again in 2015, defeating John Cena for the US title at Hell in a Cell, but trouble followed. On August 17, 2016, WWE suspended him for violating the wellness policy. Rather than serve the suspension, he exercised an opt-out and left WWE on September 9, 2016. Outside the ring, things worsened. He was suspended and stripped of Impact's world title in 2017 following a domestic violence incident, and in 2020 he was arrested in Texas on serious assault and kidnapping allegations. Charges later dropped. When WWE acquired 8AA in 2025, rumors of a return swirled. WWE responded by saying they had zero plans to work with him. Insiders were blunt that there was no King way he returns, and after an unrelated 6-month suspension from the Tijuana Commission following an attack on a spectator, his path back to WWE was effectively closed. The ban on Del Rio is less a single act than a long series of incidents that made rehiring impossible. Alicia Fox arrived in WWE as Victoria Crawford and became a fan favorite, athletic, expressive, and the Divas champion at the height of the brand. But the curtains were hiding a struggle with alcohol that would shape her final years in WWE. In April 2018, she argued with Travis Brown, Ronda Rousey's husband, in a hotel lobby before WrestleMania 34. Video and eyewitnesses suggested she appeared intoxicated, and WWE barred her from backstage that weekend. The more consequential moment came on February 10, 2019, at a house show in Saginaw, Michigan. She wrestled while allegedly intoxicated. Producers later administered a field sobriety check, and producer Arn Anderson was fired for allowing her to perform. WWE offered her rehab. She initially turned it down, but eventually accepted a 30-day program the company paid for, a decision she credits with starting her recovery. Fox has since criticized WWE for exploiting her family's struggles on Total Divas, saying they made my pain a storyline. Her contract quietly expired in 2023, and she later appeared in TNA in 2025. Ashley Massaro burst into WWE after winning the 2005 Raw Diva Search, quickly earning a place on television and in fan conversation. But her story ended in heartbreak and unanswered questions. In a 2016 affidavit tied to later litigation, Massaro alleged she was drugged and sexually assaulted at a U.S. military base clinic during a 2006 Tribute to the Troops tour, a claim she says she reported to WWE executives at the time, and that she was urged to stay silent to avoid damaging WWE's military relationships. WWE denied knowledge of the assault when these accusations resurfaced. Massaro also claimed her WWE career suffered after she rejected alleged advances from Vince McMahon, and that she was retaliated against and buried on television before her 2008 release. Officially, WWE said she left to care for her daughter, but public documents and later reporting cast that exit in a darker light. Her struggles continued after leaving WWE, and she died by suicide in 2019. Her affidavit and the context around it resurfaced during later investigations into WWE's workplace practices, and journalists have used her case to question how the company handled allegations. WWE has not restored her presence within its official legacy packages, which many interpret as a de facto erasure. Austin Aries arrived in WWE in 2016 with a reputation. He'd been a world champion all over the independent scene and expected to be treated as such. After a strong start, he suffered an orbital fracture in late 2016 and lost time. On his return, he found himself booked primarily in the cruiserweight division, which he publicly and privately resented. He repeatedly pushed for main roster placement, arguing "I don't belong here," and demanding better creative, a stance that rubbed management and colleagues the wrong way. WWE released him in July 2017. Officially, it was a release, but insiders described it as the end result of repeated backstage complaints about his attitude and influence on locker room morale. Aries' reputation for being difficult wasn't new. He'd had incidents in TNA, such as an on-camera crotch shove at announcer Christy Hemme that many saw as disrespectful. After WWE, his behavior continued to provoke controversy. In 2018, he walked out on an Impact World title match after no-selling a finish and verbally attacking colleagues on live TV. During the 2020 Speaking Out movement, multiple women accused Aries of harassment. He denied the worst allegations but publicly railed against cancel culture. There's no formal WWE statement declaring him banned, yet talent relations treat him as high risk, effectively placing him on an internal do not hire list. Bam Bam Bigelow. In the late 1980s, Bam Bam Bigelow was unlike anything wrestling had ever seen. A tattooed, 390-pound giant who moved with the speed of a cruiserweight. He debuted in WWF in 1987 and quickly became a fan favorite, teaming with Hulk Hogan and drawing huge crowds. But politics backstage and Bigelow's own frustration would unravel it all. His first run ended abruptly in 1988 after a confrontation with Andre the Giant. According to veteran accounts, Andre intentionally roughed him up in the ring, and Bigelow, already suffering 2 bad knees, walked out mid-tour. He later said he left because he wasn't being treated fairly, joining New Japan shortly after. When he returned in 1992, WWE pushed him again. He headlined WrestleMania FNAF against NFL legend Lawrence Taylor, a bout that Bigelow almost single-handedly carried. The performance earned mainstream attention, but just months later, he was gone again. His kayfabe ban storyline suspension in 1995 masked real backstage friction. He felt targeted by the Clique, the influential group of Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Triple H, and X-Pac, whom he believed buried him politically. Producer Bruce Pritchard later said Bigelow bought into the hype that the Clique was burying him and left thinking the company no longer valued him. He never returned. After his death in 2007, WWE largely omitted him from tributes until fans demanded recognition. He was never formally banned, but politically he'd burned his bridge long before the curtain closed. Barry Orton. Barry Orton, son of cowboy Bob Orton Sr. and uncle of Randy Orton, had a short in-ring career but an unforgettable impact. In 1992, he became a key voice in exposing WWE's Ring Boy scandal, a series of sexual abuse allegations involving office employees Terry Garvin, Mel Phillips, and Pat Patterson. Orton told his story on national television, describing how Garvin propositioned him for sex during a 1978 car trip when Orton was just 19. When the story broke, Orton appeared on Larry King Live and The Phil Donahue Show, directly accusing Vince McMahon of ignoring misconduct. That later admitted the isolation pushed him toward addiction and homelessness. Years later, Orton said he'd exaggerated certain details and even apologized to McMahon and Patterson, but the damage was done. WWE never rehired or referenced him again. When he passed in 2021, fans mourned him online, yet the company said nothing. He became a quiet martyr of wrestling's Brian Kendrick. Brian Kendrick was one of WWE's most eccentric stars, a cruiserweight standout whose creativity bordered on brilliance. He first joined in 2000, left, returned in 2005, and alongside Paul London, held the longest WWE Tag Team Championship reign of the decade. But after years of pushing boundaries, his defiance caught up to him. In 2009, WWE released him for multiple failed wellness policy tests involving marijuana. The firing shocked fans because marijuana wasn't typically a career ender, but his attitude, mocking management about the policy, sealed it. Kendrick later resurfaced in 2016's Cruiserweight Classic and even became Cruiserweight Champion, redeeming himself as both performer. EW immediately pulled him from his debut match, with Tony Khan tweeting that there's no room for that. Kendrick later apologized publicly, calling his past remarks ignorant and indefensible. That's Buff Bagwell. When WWE purchased WCW in 2001, Buff Bagwell looked like a natural crossover star. Polished physique, TV charisma, and name recognition. His first and only WWE match, though, changed that narrative forever. On July 2nd, 2001, he faced Booker T for the WCW Championship on Raw. The Tacoma crowd booed them out of the building, chanting "boring" and killing the atmosphere. Within a week, WWE fired him outright. The reasons went beyond crowd reaction. Backstage accounts described fights with Shane Helms, claims of fake injuries, and complaints from other talent about his attitude. Jim Ross, then then head of talent relations, later revealed Bagwell's mother repeatedly called WWE offices to ask for time off on his behalf, a reputation killer in a locker room that prized toughness. Bagwell insists he was promised a 3-month break, saying, "They told me I'd be back, but the phone never rang." Instead, his career nosedived. Years of addiction battles, car accidents, and DUIs followed, culminating in a 2025 leg amputation due to infection complications. Though he's since pursued sobriety and reality TV work, WWE's silence on him remains absolute. His name is rarely uttered on their platforms, not through malice, but because his story embodies the company's biggest WCW-era experiment gone wrong. Butch Reed. In the 1980s, Butch Reed was one of wrestling's most promising powerhouses, an athlete with charisma, muscle, and in-ring credibility. He debuted in WWE in 1986 as the Natural Butch Reed, sporting bleached blonde hair and managed by Slick. But despite early momentum, he gained a reputation for being unreliable. Reed was initially slated to win the Intercontinental Championship from Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in 1987, but the plan was scrapped when he no-showed the event. Instead, the title went to the Honky Tonk Man, launching one of the most infamous heel runs in wrestling history, a role that was supposed to be Reed's. From there, his stock in WWE plummeted. After leaving the company in 1988, he joined WCW as part of Doom with Ron Simmons, a successful run that proved his potential. Yet Reed's relationship with WWE was irreparably damaged. Bruce Pritchard later revealed that Vince McMahon considered Reed undependable and blacklisted him internally. When WWE revisited its legends in later years, Reed's name rarely came up. He was conspicuously absent from retrospectives and reunion shows. Reed never publicly badmouthed the company, but his exclusion from the Hall of Fame and historical documentaries speaks volumes. While not formally banned, his WWE career is one of opportunity lost, derailed by bad timing, personal choices, and the unforgiving politics of Vince McMahon's empire. China. If there's one omission from WWE's Hall of Fame that still sparks debate, it's China. Born Joni Laurer, she was a pioneer, the first woman to enter the Royal Rumble, the first to qualify for the King of the Ring, and the only woman ever to win the Intercontinental Championship. But her story is as tragic as it is groundbreaking. China left WWE in 2001 after her relationship with Triple H ended. She later said she was blindsided by her release, believing it stemmed from Triple H's new relationship with Stephanie McMahon. According to China, she discovered the affair and confronted both. Weeks later, her contract was not renewed. WWE claimed it was a creative decision. After leaving, she turned to reality TV and adult film work, ventures that branded her persona as tabloid rather than legend. Vince McMahon and his executives reportedly viewed those projects as incompatible with WWE's PG-era image. When fans petitioned for her Hall of Fame induction, Triple H infamously said on Stone Cold's podcast that kids could Google her name and see adult content, a quote that reignited outrage and effectively confirmed her unofficial blacklist. China struggled with addiction and mental health for years, appearing on Celebrity Rehab and attempting several comebacks in Japan and on the independent scene. In 2016, she was found dead at her California home at age 46 from an accidental overdose. Only after her death did WWE induct her posthumously in 2019 as part of D-Generation X, a partial reconciliation that still excluded her as a solo inductee. Today, fans still debate whether WWE's treatment of China was a moral stance or corporate hypocrisy. Either way, her exclusion reflected how the company once handled women who broke both barriers and expectations. Chris Benoit. Few names in wrestling are more radioactive than Chris Benoit. Once revered as one of the greatest technical wrestlers alive, Benoit's legacy was obliterated in June 2007 when he murdered his wife Nancy and 7-year-old son Daniel before hanging himself. The Benoit family tragedy changed WWE forever and led to his permanent erasure from their history. In the immediate aftermath, WWE aired a tribute episode of Raw, believing it was a double homicide. The next day, when police confirmed Benoit was the killer, WWE pulled all footage and references from its platforms, suspended his merchandise, and banned his name from broadcast. Vince McMahon later said Benoit's actions destroyed everything he'd ever achieved and that he would never be honored in any way. The tragedy sparked major reforms. WWE implemented its wellness policy, began testing for CTE, and funded concussion research. However, Benoit's name remains unmentionable within the company. He's not listed in title histories on WWE.com, and commentary teams teams are instructed never to reference him. Outside WWE, documentaries like Dark Side of the Ring humanize the story, showing a broken man suffering from trauma and brain damage. But even with that context, WWE's stance remains absolute. There will be no rehabilitation of his image, no return to highlight reels, and no forgiveness in the public eye. Benoit's ban is permanent, an act of corporate and moral self-preservation. Enzo Amore. For a few years, Enzo Amore was one of WWE's loudest stars, a fast-talking, catchphrase-spitting performer whose charisma could fill arenas. But his mouth, and the chaos surrounding it, eventually closed every door. In January 2018, WWE abruptly released him while he was cruiserweight champion after police in Phoenix opened an investigation into sexual assault allegations made by a woman on Twitter. The woman claimed she had been assaulted in a hotel room by Amore, real name Eric Arndt, and two others. WWE said it was unaware of the investigation until the public accusation and terminated him for failing to disclose it. When police later closed the case for lack of evidence, Amore released a rap song titled Phoenix, denying all allegations. He insisted WWE never apologized and accused them of destroying his reputation without due process. WWE never rehired him, and insiders confirmed that despite being cleared, he was viewed as too much of a PR liability to bring back. In the years since, Enzo reinvented himself on the indie circuit under the name Real One, stirring new controversies on social media and feuding publicly with wrestlers from AEW and MLW. In 2024, he claimed WWE executives reached out about a one-night nostalgia cameo, but according to his own words, talks fell apart fast. Whether by mutual choice or corporate decree, his name remains on WWE's quiet blacklist, another cautionary tale of how fast superstardom can implode. Hulk Hogan. Few names in wrestling history carry the mythic weight of Hulk Hogan. For an entire generation, he wasn't just WWE's face, he was wrestling itself. The yellow trunks, the Hulkamania shirt rips, the finger-wagging comebacks, all of it defined the boom that built Vince McMahon's empire. Yet in 2015, almost 40 years after he first stepped into the spotlight, Hogan's empire crumbled overnight. That summer, gossip site Gawker published excerpts from a leaked sex tape transcript in which Hogan was recorded using racist slurs during a private rant. Within hours, WWE terminated his contract, removed him from its Hall of Fame listing, and issued a corporate statement condemning unacceptable conduct. His name was wiped from merchandise, promotional clips, and even the company's own streaming library. For decades, he had been the company's moral compass. Now he was its liability. Hogan publicly apologized, saying it was a moment of anger, not racism, and later told Good Morning America that he'd been raised in a segregated era and was ashamed of what he'd said. Still, the damage was immense. Sponsors dropped him, children's charities cut ties, and the man who once sold out WrestleMania was suddenly persona non grata. Behind the scenes, Hogan sued Gawker for invasion of privacy and won a massive settlement, but WWE remained distant. It wasn't until mid-2018 that he was quietly reinstated to the Hall of Fame after repeated apologies and a locker room meeting framed as a sensitivity outreach. Reports from that meeting were divided. Some veterans felt his remorse was genuine. Others, especially black talent, called it performative. The New Day later released a statement saying, "We forgive, but we don't forget," capturing the uneasy truce between legacy and accountability. Today, Hogan occasionally appears in WWE retrospectives, but his presence is cautious, almost ghost-like. The legend who once told fans to say your prayers and eat your vitamins became the company's most difficult lesson in public redemption. Proof that in the digital age, even icons can be erased and rewritten. Ryback. When Ryback, Ryan Reeves, roared, "Feed me more," on live TV, crowds responded with seismic energy. Between 2012 and 2014, he looked destined to be the next unstoppable monster in WWE. His bodybuilder physique, simple catchphrase, and explosive style turned him into a merchandising dream. But Ryback wanted more than chance. He wanted control. By 2016, creative frustrations boiled over. He was tired of being scripted to lose and of the pay scale gap between stars and undercard wrestlers. On his blog, he argued that winners and losers should be paid the same because outcomes were predetermined. WWE management disagreed, viewing his comments as a breach of professionalism. When negotiations stalled, Ryback walked out mid-contract and was quietly sent home. Soon, his dispute turned personal. He accused WWE of deliberately sabotaging his career, claiming they muted his crowd reactions, delayed merchandise checks, and tried to bury his brand online. On social media, he accused the company of manipulating search results and his trademark filings. That paranoia climaxed when he filed to trademark Ryback himself and lost the case in 2020 since WWE had owned the intellectual property for years. Then came the tweets, angry, erratic posts suggesting Vince McMahon should die before the company improves. Insiders said those statements pushed him onto WWE's internal do not contact list. Even friendly overtures from fellow wrestlers were discouraged. Away from the ring, Ryback launched a fitness supplement line and a YouTube channel where he alternates motivational advice with long rants about WWE's culture. He's repeatedly hinted at a tell-all book that has yet to appear. The irony is that he still preaches positivity, yet every story circles back to the company he can't forgive. In many ways, Ryback's ban is self-inflicted, the result of burning bridges he once helped build. Teddy Hart. The Hart family is wrestling royalty, and Teddy Hart was once supposed to extend that dynasty. Trained in the famous Calgary Dungeon, he signed with WWE in 1998 at just 18, the youngest contract in company history. With athleticism that bordered on reckless genius, he could perform double backflips and springboards years before they were mainstream, but discipline never matched talent. Within months, Hart clashed with trainers and was released in 2004 for repeated unprofessional conduct. He'd ignored match layouts, improvised dangerous spots, and argued with veterans. Jim Ross later described him as a walking headache, brilliant in flashes, impossible to manage. Developmental coaches tried giving him another chance, but he lasted only weeks before being sent home again. Outside WWE, Hart's life spiraled into chaos. Independent promoters loved his ability, but feared his volatility. Between 2014 and 2022, he was arrested repeatedly for assault, narcotics possession, and evading police. Each headline further distanced him from the family legacy that once protected him. In 2020, he faced a domestic violence charge, later dropped, but by then WWE had circulated internal notices to developmental affiliates stating no negotiations or rehiring discussions were permitted. The darkest chapter came with the disappearance of his former girlfriend Samantha Fiddler in 2016. She vanished in Florida after last being seen with Hart. He was never charged, but the mystery became tabloid fixation, cementing his notoriety. Today, Hart drifts on the indie circuit, sometimes appearing at small shows under assumed names. He still posts training videos and claims he'll return when the world's ready. The truth, WWE moved on long ago. His ban is both professional and moral, a cautionary reminder that lineage can open doors, but behavior determines whether they stay open. Velveteen Dream. When Velveteen Dream, Patrick Clark, appeared on NXT in 2017, he felt revolutionary. Draped in velvet, channeling Prince's swagger with Macho Man's flair, he was unlike anyone on the roster. Fans and critics agreed he was the future of the company. By 2019, he was the North American champion, a fixture on highlight reels, and an ambassador for the brand's new identity. But in 2020, everything collapsed. During the Shark Speaking Out movement, multiple fans accused Clark of sending explicit messages to minors. Screenshots circulated online, along with audio clips that allegedly featured his voice. WWE immediately suspended him and launched an internal inquiry. Weeks later, Triple H stated that the investigation found nothing that indicates wrongdoing, and Dream quietly returned to TV. Fans rebelled. Every arena he entered filled with chants of "Fire Velveteen." As more evidence surfaced, pressure mounted. In May 2021, WWE released him, citing behavioral issues. Months later, police reports revealed Clark had been arrested for battery and trespassing after a confrontation in Florida. Those charges were minor, but symbolically devastating. WWE executives, wary of renewed backlash, reportedly blacklisted him from all future events. Insiders said the decision wasn't purely moral, it was practical risk management. The company had rebuilt its image after the Speaking Out era, and any association with Clark risked reopening old wounds. Since then, Dream has defended himself online, insisting he was framed and that WWE abandoned him too soon. But even sympathetic voices admit the public's trust is gone. On social media, his occasional posts draw more skepticism than support. From megastar to ghost, Patrick Clark's trajectory mirrors the modern wrestling paradox. Talent can build fame overnight, but one controversy can erase it just as fast. Love this video? Click on the cards on your screen for more.